Excellent. So I'm going to pass it over to Ruth Feldman to kick off our panel discussion today.
Great. Thanks, Rachel. Good morning, everybody. Good to see familiar faces and new faces. I'm going to keep it brief. I just wanted to give a little bit of context for this morning. Bear with me 1 minute. Zoom always chooses the most inopportune time for messaging. Here we go. So context for today. I've been with the Women's Business Center for 5 years now. Over those 5 years, I often will get the question of, well, I think I want to do a business, but I think I might want to do a nonprofit. I really want to be in business, but I really want to like change the world, right? Or do some kind of good in the world. And so I would help people to understand the differences and the possibilities, right, in the advising that I do. But I thought, as we developed our programming with the Women's Business Center, that it might be useful to start to gather people together who are interested in the topic of how do I do well in business while I'm doing good in the world, right? What are my options? And so we did a panel a while back, which is why we're calling this the second panel, right? The second iteration of Do Well and Do Good. And in that first one, we basically had a few clients come together and speak about how they give back as a business. And that was great. And it was wonderful. And as always, we find it really useful to have that peer-to-peer opportunity, right? To ask questions, to share ideas. And we wanted to take a somewhat deeper dive because people do ask about B Corp, and those first round panelists were not involved in B Corp. We thought it might be useful to give just a quick legal overview. I don't know if that's a oxymoron, but a high level briefing on what some of the options are and what they mean from a legal perspective, but then bring panelists in again, which is what we're going to do. So we are thrilled to have today Helen Sterling Coburn of Bernstein Shur. We have Becky McKinnell, the founder CEO of iBec Creative. Hazel Stark of Maine Outdoor School. You might know her from some of the cohorts that she helps to run here. And Jennifer Piette of Narrative Food. And we're going to get to hear a little bit from each one of them about their businesses, about how they do good in the world while running their business. And I thought we'd start with Helen Sterling Coburn of Bernstein Shur. And then we'll have each of them introduce themselves, right? And dig into some juicy questions. So Helen, I'm going to turn it over to you. And I think Rachel, thank you for being there to help Helen with her presentation. And then I'll pick it up after about 15, 20 minutes. We will have a short window of time for any general legal questions. But then we'll have Helen here with the other panelists at the very end. So if we don't get time to answer your question right up front with Helen, put it in the chat. If anyone thinks of any other questions while we're going around and having a conversation, put it in the chat, and I will do my best to save time at the end, and we'll go through those questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Helen.
Great. And then I'm going to start by, thank you, Ruth, for the introduction, and I'm excited to be here, everyone. I'm going to start by sharing my screen, so fingers crossed that I correctly do that, and then we'll dive right in. So, all right. Is everyone able to see the presentation? Great. So again, thank you for having me today. My name is Helen Coburn. I'm a shareholder here at Bernstein Shur. I do, just jumping into this, I want to give a quick thanks to one of our associate attorneys, Carly Lebrecht, who helped me put together the presentation materials. I'm going to really try to keep things high level because I think what's going to be most interesting today is hearing from the panelists themselves. But as Ruth noted, there's a lot of different objectives that you may be trying to fulfill when you're thinking about forming an entity, what kind of business operation you want to have, what you want to do with your business, and then what's legally required. So what I'll do in going through the materials is just kind of, again, talk about at high level. I won't spend time going through each item on this agenda. We'll just dive right in. So when you think about this, there's nonprofits, which I think most people are familiar with, a not-for-profit like an L3C, or for-profit entity, which is think any of your ordinary LLCs, business corporations, partnerships, you name it. And I think traditionally there's been a view that if you're a for-profit enterprise, there's not really much of an avenue for giving back, or it's the nonprofit or the L3C not-for-profit that have more of that feel-good approach. Obviously, with the emergence of the B Corp movement and benefit corporations, that is shifting slightly. And from a legal standpoint, the legal world has had to try to catch up with the trends socially, because there are legal restrictions on what certain types of entities can or can't do that could have impacts on the type of behavior that you're engaged in. So just to kind of level set with everyone on the call, so a nonprofit entity is an entity that is created under applicable state law, that is with the objective of doing sort of charitable or socially beneficial purposes. They don't always have to be tax exempt, but if you are organized as a nonprofit corporation, you can apply for exemption from federal income tax, for example, like the 501c3 is what you hear most frequently. A not-for-profit organization is an like an L3C, does not have as a primary purpose the purpose of raising a profit. It may generate profit, but it is also, it's sort of like the LLC version of a nonprofit corporation, where its primary purpose is really to fulfill a charitable or educational purpose consistent with IRS rules on nonprofits. And then I think many of us are all familiar with for-profit organizations. Again, those can be partnerships, LLCs, corporations. And at the end of the day, those are really kind of organized with the purpose of somehow, setting expectations around how economic returns are going to flow to the shareholders or members of those organizations. So in talking through those distinctions, I've sort of talked about the different types of entities. I do want to just say a quick note about B Corps, which is B Corp certification is a private certification process. It does not necessarily mean that you're organized as a state law corporation. There are many different B Corps. Some of them are LLCs. Some of them are corporations. Looking at Androscoggin Bank, for example, they're technically a banking corporation, which is its own statutory designation. And when you go through the B Corp certification process, what B Lab is concerned with, B Lab is the private nonprofit that that certifies entities that are going through the B Corp certification process. What they're concerned with is making sure that the governance documents of the applicable entity that is applying for B Corp certification embody the values of B Lab, namely transparency, a governance mission that really tries to focus on having the entity consider all stakeholders when it is making decisions about the type of actions that it's going to undertake, as compared to just the shareholders. So we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail as well, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone understands that a B Corp might be one of any of these different types of entities that we're discussing today. Let's just see. We'll share this presentation later, so I won't read through each slides. The certified B Corp, again, is a private label certification. So this is what you would see. I need to correct this slide a little bit because I know that the certification process is in the process of changing. The B Corp certification process in and of itself is not inherently a legal process. So there's, again, you're going through this certification with B-Lab where it touches on legal. And so like where I've been asked to get involved with things is, again, as part of the benefit corporation or the B Corp certification, you have to be able to demonstrate to B-Lab that your corporate organizational documents embody these governance provisions that are consistent with B-Lab standards. So what that means is if you're organized in a state like Maine that has a Benefit Corporation Act and you want to be a corporation as compared to an LLC or partnership or other entity, then you must organize as a benefit corporation, which brings us to the slide of benefit corporation. So a benefit corporation is basically a normal business corporation with the caveat that it statutorily fits. There's a section of the Business Corporation Act that is the Benefit Corporation Act that modifies some of the typical things that you would see with a business corporation. And really the most significant of those from a corporate entity standpoint is the governance provision. So for a regular for-profit business corporation, the board of directors are directed by statute and by applicable case law when they're making decisions about what the corporation is going to do. They must do that in the best interest of the corporation, which case law and generally interprets as in the best interest of the shareholders. And the way that whole body of law has evolved, it's really historically been focusing on what maximizes economic return to the shareholders. So if you're a board member of a regular corporation and you're trying to make a decision, you have a fiduciary duty. That's by law to make that decision. The beauty of the Benefit Corporation Act is to align it with what's required by B-Lab, to align it with the concept that you really want to consider stakeholders like your employees, the environment, members of the community, when you're trying to decide what actions you should be taking. The statute is permissive on that. So it mandates that the directors include stakeholders or think about decisions and how they impact stakeholders other than just shareholders when making the determination of what's in the best interest of the corporation. So to form a benefit corporation, you go through the process that you would typically do if you're forming a regular business corporation, except that you check a box that says you're a benefit corporation and you think through what your sort of general purpose is and whether you want to have a specific purpose that you articulate in your articles that talks about what good things you want to do and what you care about as a benefit corporation and what that mission is that you want to progress. Before I switch over to L3Cs, I just want to do a quick stop share and quick switch over to the Maine Secretary of State's website, where you can see the different links to forms that you would need to file if you're forming any of these entities. So I was, with a benefit corporation, you don't actually even see it listed here. It falls under the category of business corporation. And when you go to do the filing, it's literally just checking a box on the articles of incorporation to indicate that you're forming this as a benefit corporation. It's not that easy. You'll have other things in your bylaws or your articles that provide additional information about what it means to be a benefit corporation and what your mission is. But I just wanted to, from a practical standpoint, highlight where all of this fits for folks. Similarly, for limited liability companies, there's a link here. If you're interested in L3C, this is where you would be clicking not-for-profit or not-profit corporations. And then we don't have time today to talk about cooperatives, but that's a whole separate area that also allows, if you're thinking through types of entities, it has a component to it that allows you to really have a mission-driven organization. All right. So the next type of legal entity that you could think about is a low-profit limited liability company. That's an L3C. These are some examples of some locally. Just flip to my notes here. So under the statute, an L3C has to satisfy three requirements, and that's that it needs to significantly further the accomplishment of one or more charitable or educational purposes. And this is actually specific within the meaning of section 170C2B of the Internal Revenue Code. It does have private ownership structure. It is but it must not have a significant purpose of producing income or profit. And then it can't have, and this kind of touches on some of the nonprofit regs, it can't have as a purpose the accomplish of one or more political or legislative purposes. So the L3Cs that I've been involved with typically look and feel a lot like a regular limited liability company. They just have this restrictive language in their LLC agreement. It's, generally they are set up with the idea that it is to help align mission to be able to enable certain types of organizations to accept donations, but they are not tax exempt organizations. So I have found that these don't tend to be as popular of a structure, but they're definitely worth thinking about in terms of what your mission is and whether this aligns with the interests that you have. So I'll kind of breeze over this one since I've already pointed to where things are in the Secretary of State's website. Ruth, how am I doing on time?
Good. Maybe another 5 minutes.
Okay. Then nonprofits, and I think there's been a lot of discussion around nonprofit entities from some of our prep calls leading up to this panel. I think, again, most people are familiar with nonprofits. So it's an organization that's created to operate for charitable or socially beneficial purposes. So a lot of times you see these having some sort of educational objective, or focused on doing things that are beneficial of certain types of charitable purposes, like protecting the environment, religious organizations. Again, education is really a big one, I find, in terms of the organizations that we're involved with. Nonprofits, obviously, by their definition, are not out there to make profit, and they don't have owners or shareholders who would be receiving profits of the organization. With that said, a nonprofit that's run in a financially sound manner that basically has high operating revenue is able to generally expand its mission and do more with the organization. So it's not a you shall not earn money or run yourselves into the ground organization. It really, a well-managed nonprofit really functions much like a regular business corporation. It's just thinking through what is happening with the funds that are generated by the nonprofit, and how nonprofits go about raising funds, which is distinctly different from how a benefit corporation, for example, might be attracting investment. So let me just see. So one of the things to keep in mind with a nonprofit, from a board of directors standpoint, we were talking with the benefit corporation, talking about how it's important under the Benefit Corporation Act for that to statutorily give the directors the ability to make decisions taking into account stakeholders other than just shareholders. With a nonprofit, obviously your board has a different mission. So your articles of incorporation for a nonprofit have articulated what your charitable purpose and what your mission is. And the board of directors of a nonprofit, which under Maine law must always be at least 3 people, one of whom must be independent, needs to take action and make decisions in a manner that is consistent with the purpose and the mission of the nonprofit. And there are especially with tax exempt nonprofits, there are a number of rules and regulations that also provide guideposts for directors in terms of making decisions. The biggest of which are really conflict of interest rules. So if you have, for example, an executive director who's receiving compensation because they're getting paid a salary by the nonprofit, they're also on the board. You kind of have to go through a few other bells and whistles to make sure that that you're complying with all of these regulations. I'm keeping this very high level, so sorry for that. So setting up a nonprofit is in some ways similar to setting up a business corporation, but especially if you're going for the tax exempt status, it is, oops, I've got a typo there, sorry, tax exempt status. You have a whole separate overlay. So the beginning portion would be similar to if you're setting up a benefit corporation or even setting up an LLC. So you're doing your just basic formation documents. You're thinking about your mission and vision statements. You file your articles, you adopt all of these things, and then you have to go through, if you're a nonprofit that's seeking a tax exempt certification by the IRS, then you have to go through and put together your application that gets filed with the IRS, which typically means adopting conflict of interest policies and a few other things that are frankly good practice for nonprofits, regardless of whether you are seeking 501c3 certification or not. So that is my high-level overview of those three entity structures. I don't know if we want to do any quick questions now, Ruth, or hold to the end.
Well, I'm going to jump in. Also, just that was great and really appreciate the overview, and the fact that you're going to leave that with us is going to be hugely helpful. I do just want to remind everybody that CEI, as a nonprofit with the business centers, are here to primarily, we get funded to help people start businesses. It doesn't mean we don't want to talk to you or help you or support you. Typically, when clients come to me and are pretty clear that a nonprofit is what they want, I spent many years in the nonprofit world. I'm happy to speak about it, but in terms of advice or help setting it up, besides these wonderful slides, we usually refer people to the Maine Association of Nonprofits. They're just a good resource, and I can remember to kind of put those in the notes as well. So I just wanted to, full disclosure, right? Like our focus and our funding, is not necessarily nonprofits, but happy to discuss. Why don't we say, like, if there are, I haven't checked the chat, but if people want to unmute, if there's a particular high-level question for Helen before we move on, it won't be your last chance. But if anyone has a question for now, we can address that or we can move on. No pressure.
Someone just posted.
Yep.
I will be working with a nonprofit which is thinking of creating an L3C as part of their structure. Thoughts? Oh yeah, so I should have given my disclaimer, which is this is a general presentation. I am not providing specific legal advice. The opinions I express are those of my own, not the firm. So, I think with a nonprofit that's setting up subsidiaries or things like that, the interplay between the entities are really important. So if the nonprofit is tax exempt, then there's specific rules about what it can and cannot do. There's the concept of private annulment. So then if you have a relationship between a for-profit entity, even an L3C is low profit, but it can still have a profit. I think you just need to be very careful about what the interplay is and how any relationships are defined. So that one I might suggest going, to counsel and just getting some input there. The other thing I would offer is I don't want to knock L3Cs too much, but the beauty of the Limited Liability Company Act generally is that ultimately the LLC agreement controls. So there isn't a specific tax designation for L3Cs. for some organizations, they need to have the L3C because it's basically saying that you're certifying in accordance with these IRS standards. But those are kind of, no one's really monitoring that. So even the organizations that might be interested for various tax reasons in having an L3C, you'd really want to work with them closely to see whether that will actually help support donation by them or not in the L3C. I find, I mean, you can, if your objective is becoming a certified B Corp, you can easily accomplish that with an LLC and just pulling in the governance provisions or even other things with respect to how you want to, how the members of the LLC agree amongst themselves as to how things are going to be handled. So I think I just wanted to offer that quick thought too. Yeah.
Great. I think we'll leave it at that for the moment. We can come back to that. I would say let's move on to very brief introductions. Rachel, I'll let you're gonna sort of control the intro slide. So maybe, I don't know if you wanna introduce in a certain order, but what I would ask our panelists to do is just briefly, right? Like just a sentence, a couple of sentences, describe your business or your service, describe your business, one-liner if you can, like what is it you do, the year you established your business, and if you could share what legal entity you have chosen. And that'll be a quick by way of introduction. How's that sound, Rachel?
That sounds great. I'm going to share my screen so you all have a visual while folks are talking. Okay, let me know if you can see that. Great, excellent. Okay, the order, I know we have not gone through this yet. The order will be Becky, Hazel, and then Jennifer. So, Becky, if you wouldn't mind going first, I have your slide up.
Excellent, thank you. My name is Becky McKinnell. I own iBec Creative. We're a digital agency in Portland, Maine. So we help companies with websites and digital marketing, advertising, social media. I started the company in 2006. Originally, I was an LLC, and then I switched over to an S Corp. And I was an S Corp. I still am an S Corp. But back in 2022, I worked with Helen to become a benefit corporation in the state of Maine, and then proceeded to get my B Corp certification for iBec.
Thank you. Next up is Hazel.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks for having us. So I'm the co-owner and co-founder, naturalist educator at Maine Outdoor School, which is an L3C. We incorporated in 2016, and we provide standards-aligned outdoor programs at public schools. We guide educational nature hikes and paddling experiences, and offer professional development opportunities for adults looking to incorporate the outdoors into their work. And we are federally designated as an S Corp, so that's how we are taxed, even though we're an L3C in Maine. And yeah, I can talk about more about how that has all worked and the sort of transformation of that over time later.
Awesome. Thank you. And last but not least, Jennifer.
Hi, we're super happy to be here. So Narrative Food is a woman-owned B Corp and member of 1% for the Planet. We specialize in corporate gift boxes of curated small batch foods. So our mission is embodied in the Design to Give B Corp impact model. So B Corp has various different kinds of impact models. And with this, we're committed to donating a minimum of 2% of revenues to nonprofits working to change the world. That way, every box we create gives back. So I founded the company in 2010. At that time, we were in Los Angeles, so we're actually a California C Corporation. And in 2013, we became a certified B Corp, so we've been there for over a decade. And then within the commitments, we had 2 years in which to change our articles so that we are a benefit corporation, which happened, I think, in 2015. Yeah, that's about it.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to stop share. You'll get these slides after today, and we have some WBC links as well. So a lot of information on these slides, but everybody will get them after the session today. I will pass it back over to Ruth to moderate the panel.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. So I have about 5 other questions top of mind. We may get time to go through all of them. We might kind of combine because there are definitely connecting dots amongst those questions. But I thought we'd start off before we dive into the nitty-gritty, just to, if you can each, and why don't we started with Becky, so why don't we flip it? We can maybe start with Jennifer, Becky, and then Hazel. Just to let you know what the lineup is. Why don't we talk about just general inspiration? You've touched a little bit on kind of what is your double bottom line, sometimes we say, right? Clearly you're all in business, so you need to make some revenue, generate revenue, but what might be that double bottom line? What change or impact you want to make in the world is really driving how you wanted to structure or be in business. Does that question make sense? Jennifer, you want to tackle that as best you can? And we'll get into some of the more specifics, like how do you market that, or how does that structure impact your business? So those are some of the questions coming down the road, just so you know. But if you just want give us a big broad idea, that would be great.
So when I founded the company in 2010, that was just sort of on the coattails of the 2008 situation and Occupy and all of those things. And I wanted to create a corporation. I wanted to have the ability to one day potentially have an exit. So a nonprofit didn't really work for me, but at the same time, it was really clear to me that I wanted to have a stakeholder first approach to things and have an impact in what I did, so that it wasn't just that fiduciary duty to maximize profits. So for the first 12 years when we were in California, we were a farm to table home delivery service. Until basically the pandemic, we had a huge spike. And then after that, we had a hard fall and we pivoted. But during that time, we were following a different impact model, which was the local impact model. So we were sourcing from all local growers and makers, and we were delivering to Southern California. So it was really a fully local impact model. Then when we pivoted the business, we started to ship nationally and source nationally. And so it just didn't feel like it was a fit anymore. So that's where we changed into the design to give impact model. And we joined 1% for the Planet. And then we moved to Maine and moved our headquarters to Deer Isle.
A lot of changes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was quite a roller coaster ride for us, because as you can imagine, with home delivery during the pandemic, we quintupled in about 3 weeks on our volume, and then everybody went back out when everything opened up again, and so we had a loss, and we just had to figure out, okay, let's see how can we continue to make an impact, but using a different model. So, what remains the same is that our goal is to support planet-friendly small-scale food makers. And now we've really embedded the give back to the nonprofits within our model. And with that dual approach, we feel like our business drives and measures our social and environmental impact just as much, or more so probably, than our financial metrics. And every year we do create an impact report, which details this impact. And we use a platform called Unit of Impact, which was developed by 3 B Corp friends. And it's just a very easy to use for a small company way to, show your goals, your impact, all of this. So that's
interesting. Good. Well, that's sort of a segue into, we'll dive into that. I'm sure people want to hear a little bit more about it. I'm going to move us along just to make sure that everyone has some airtime, but thank you. That was great. Becky, do you want to dive in? So it's basically like, what's your double bottom line? What change or impact feels important to you and your business?
Yeah, we exist as a business to help businesses and the people behind them thrive online. So to us, it's not just about making something and then having it look good, but nothing happening. We really want to make sure that we have transparent results with clients and that really transparent, candid relationship so that we can show that the work that we're doing with our clients is making a measurable impact on their business. And that's been true from the very beginning when I first started iBec. And then over the years, as I started to build my team, I really felt a deep responsibility as an employer to make sure that iBec was a great place to work. And that, you know, I remember when I had my first employee and thinking that I was responsible for 40 hours of their life every week. And I wanted to make sure that it was a rewarding experience working for iBec and that people were growing and learning and just a generally positive element of their lives. So I continually am striving to be an employer that is following all the best practices, but also being like really creative and innovative with how we grow our team and build our culture. And then in addition, making sure that we're giving back to the community with our work, even though we're not directly doing the work, like we'll do volunteer events where we're helping do trail work with Portland Trails and other examples. But what we found is that we can really make a big impact by donating our services to other nonprofits that can't necessarily afford to build their own website or refresh their branding or figure out a social media campaign. So it's just having that dedication to making sure that we're transparent with our clients and producing results for them, that we're making sure that iBec is the best place to work. We're giving back to our community. And then in addition, making sure that we have the least amount of negative impact on the environment as possible. Those two all combined really sum up to what it means to be a certified B Corporation. So I really wanted to go through the process of getting that formal certification so that I had a benchmark that I could use to measure how we're doing in all those areas, rather than like Becky as the owner and the CEO, like what was in my gut of how to do things had worked until a point, and then I wanted to have that more established framework and benchmark so that it could be more transparent to not only our employees but the other stakeholders in the company.
Great. And we'll definitely, you're all like, it's hard because as I said, all the dots are connected. So Becky, you definitely, that was also a good segue into like, how does that really surface and how does that take hold? So we'll get to that one in a second. Hazel, why don't you speak to that double bottom line or what change or impact you're working towards?
Sure. So the way that I really think about Maine Outdoor School is that we are the mission. That is what we do. Without the impact, we wouldn't exist because our goal is really mission focused first, and not even first, but exclusively, I think is how we think about it. And so all of the revenue that we receive is in exchange for services that we provide that we believe are fostering resilience and stewardship in the communities we serve. So we really first started out, I had a background, and the other co-founder, Joe Horn, and we both had a background in environmental education, teaching at outdoor schools and environmental ed centers across the country for a while. I grew up in Maine and knew I wanted to bring those kinds of services back to rural Maine, but we were having a really hard time finding a job that was a sustainable job. that we could actually afford to have in the environmental ed realm. And so our first goal was to make sure we created an organization that was a fun and sustainable place to work, not just like a seasonal place, not just I can do it when I'm in college or fresh out of college, but as a career, as a place that people who are passionate about the outdoors could teach other people about the outdoors, but actually get benefits and have a reasonable work-life balance. And so that's where we started, was actually trying to think about how can we make environmental ed look like a sustainable place to work where anyone could have this job, not just people who can afford to work 60+ hours a week. And so we first started with the idea that it would be a nonprofit, because that was the paradigm, right? Like if you do good, it's going to be a nonprofit. So we actually went to grad school to try to figure out how to incorporate Maine Outdoor School. We didn't have a name for it at that point. And quickly kind of realized that nonprofit might not accomplish what we were trying to accomplish as simply as we had hoped to. And so we, through working with grad school advisors and folks along the way, doing a lot of research, recognized that a business was a model that could allow us to be more nimble, and both to just, what are the community desires related to our skill set, so that we could pivot to say, like, we have this background in outdoor place-based education, but what that looks like, we're open to. What does the community want? And so what we found was that the public schools were really itching to have outdoor learning opportunities as part of the school day, not as an extra, not as a separate organization where kids would be like shipped off to, but as part of the school day in their schoolyards. And so we were able to do that because that's what the communities that we were working in were really looking for. So the way that we think about it is that everything that we're doing is in exchange for us offering those outdoor related services. And the way we kind of frame it at this point is thinking that, most people know that getting outside is healthy and fun, but they struggle with meaningfully bringing nature's benefits into their personal lives or classrooms or organizations. So that's where we come in. And so everything we do is custom to helping fill those gaps and meet those needs for schools, for organizations, for individuals who are looking to learn and benefit from outdoor time.
Great. Yes. Personally, I appreciate that you are also right in my backyard. So I love seeing all the programming you're doing. Well, wonderful. You've each touched on sort of some of the other questions I had in my mind. We're doing pretty well on time. So the next question I want to throw out there, and I don't want to be the one to call on people. The three of you can jump in as you see fit if you have something to add. I wonder if you've each kind of mentioned what is at your core and what your sort of passion is in terms of giving back. How do you integrate that into either the day-to-day operations or the marketing, the programming, or financially? I guess I know I threw a lot out there, but it's a question about, those things that you feel passionate about, how do they really weave into what you do? I know, Hazel, you said like it is who you are, but if you could give folks who've maybe are contemplating this or who've never done this, if anyone wants to speak to how you integrate that status of your entity into either your programming or your marketing or your financial structure. Any of you, any of you who want to jump in?
I'm happy to start. I find that a lot of it is through habits and documentation. So our handbook has a lot about how we give back to the community, how we treat our employees. For example, when we became a certified B Corp, one of the questions that you can earn points for is whether or not you buy local, and if you have a buy local policy. And I always thought, like, yes, of course, like we try to buy local wherever possible, but I didn't have anything documented and I didn't have a process about that. So going through the certification made me think about, okay, what is our buy local policy? How do I educate the people that are in charge of making purchasing decisions on what our buy local policy is? and then documenting it and adding it to our handbook. So I think that kind of taking what you are doing from your heart and operationalizing it and documenting it has been really helpful. And then figuring out ways that you can create habits of doing good. So an example is for measuring our employee happiness, we have a monthly survey that goes out where we're getting anonymous feedback on how people feel about recommending iBec as a great place to work. And there's different themes for each survey. So we're constantly getting feedback, whether it's about management or teamwork or our work, like the work that we're producing for clients. And then we do a quarterly, what we call a retrospective, where all the non-managers meet and talk about the last 3 months and report back on things that they want to see improved at the company. So a lot of these things that we do to achieve our goals of being a great place to work and giving back to nonprofits, that it all kind of happens on a scheduled basis.
Great, thanks. I'm taking mini notes in the chat, so once we hear from panelists, I'll throw those notes out there on the chat, and that way we can save that as well.
So
yeah,
I can say, so in our case, it's more of an outward facing storytelling. Narrative food is about storytelling in a big way. So, firstly, we do put the B Corp and the 1% logos on all of our collateral in each one of our boxes, but also we are storytelling in our collateral and really trying to, so each box gives back to a nonprofit, and often these are custom boxes for companies, and they'll have a nonprofit that they particularly want to support. So we can tell that story in the collateral to all of the people that get those gifts, and that's really elevating that nonprofit story and exposing it to lots of other people and why the company cares about it. And equally, we're telling the stories of all of the small makers in that collateral. I do want to make a little side note here is that we recently started a B Corp network. So within B Corp, there are all these different networks, and it's called the B1 network. So it's for all of the B Corps that are also 1% for the Planet members. So we're really trying to elevate that double commitment of, having all of these practices, but also giving back. And I guess in terms of an example, like our biggest beneficiary over the past couple of years has been World Central Kitchen, which I've been really proud to send thousands of dollars to at this time, with in particular their help, feeding people in war-stricken zones and disaster-stricken zones. But we're also starting to support local nonprofits like Wabanaki Reach, for whom we owe a great acknowledgement. And then there's a lot of apps that simplify this for us. So we have a Shopify store, and we have an app called Shopping Gives, which is from another B Corp that manages all of our donations and tracks them at the point of purchase. So that really helps with our transparency and efficiency in our giving.
great, thank
Yeah,
you.
I can jump in. As I mentioned before, of course, the business is the passion project. And so all of what we do really yields that big picture goal of connecting people to their backyards and ecosystems and understanding their impact on it, and then building the skills to better enjoy it. But I can definitely speak to the kind of logistical underpinning of that, because of course everything we do is yielding this impact, but what about all of the background stuff? So one of the big goals we had starting out was to make sure that full-time employees are based on a 35-hour-a-week work week. And that's what we consider full-time, so that people do have a good work-life balance and aren't just stuck, doing their work all the time and getting really sucked in, which I think is such a common American concept, right? To just work all the time. And we wanted to challenge that a little bit, especially in this field that it's really uncommon in. And we wanted to really start providing benefits. So slowly but surely, we've been adding benefits to our employees, like a 401k for them, which is also pretty uncommon in this field. But to do that, of course, how do we make our programs accessible? Because it's one thing to say like, oh, our staff is really well paid and happy and has a great work-life balance, but how do our, the public schools across Hancock and Washington counties where we primarily work, how do they afford our programs? So one of the things that being an L3C has helped us think about is how to partner with nonprofits a lot of the times. So I think one of the worries starting out and one of the reasons we didn't go nonprofit was the idea that we would be competing for the same pool of grant funding within our field with other nonprofits that we believed in and were mission aligned that exist. We have so many nonprofits in Maine. So by being an L3C, we cannot get those grants, right? And so we were okay with that because our idea was that if we collaborate with nonprofits, then we can work together to maximize both of our impacts. So our most successful work that we have done is partnering particularly with land trusts. So land trusts are conservation organizations that in our area are usually pretty small. They have a pretty small staff. And what they do really well is stewardship and conserving land in that world. But what we do really well is getting people excited about nature and getting them out there and using that. And so by working together, a nonprofit can bring in donations and grant funding and their wonderful suite of ways that nonprofits receive income. And then they can contract us to provide our educational services in their community and at their schools, making the majority of our school programs free to the schools and the people that receive them. So we get contracted and, we set our rates and they'll pay them, right? Because we're doing good work. We're showing that value that it really matters and it counts. So, but that means that the participants of our programs, I would say over 95% of the time are accessing free programs from us because a nonprofit partner is paying us to do it. And as a result, our impact is greater than the sum of its parts. So when we're working with a land trust, we're building up their mission and the importance of conserving land. And we're able to teach more people outside as a result of their support. And neither of us could do that as well if we were working in isolation. So that's one way that we really thought about how can our structure complement what's going on. And so as a result, when we're partnering with nonprofits, they're bringing in more money to those nonprofits and it's bringing us revenue, which is awesome because that's how we're able to make sure that these nonprofits that we believe in are getting lifted up and it's lifting up our mission at the same time. So everything we're doing is through cool creative collaboration and partnerships to figure out like who wants this programming, what's the barrier to entry, who can we work with to make it accessible, and how can we build up the other great work that's happening that's really aligned with what we're doing at the same time.
Wow. You had me at the collaboration is greater than the individual organizations. And I think that thread kind of runs amongst all of you, it sounds like, to a certain degree, right? Because you're out there helping, whether that's farms or small businesses. So I just threw a couple of very rough notes as you all were talking. I want to be careful about time, although I don't see a whole lot of questions in the chat, which is also fine. Just a quick reminder for anyone who joined us late, use the chat to jot down any questions you might have, and I'll make sure that we save a little bit of time for that. I'm going to shift a little bit because
Ruth, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I am interrupting. Could I just offer a quick reflection kind of
Absolutely.
on those three? So Hazel was just talking about the process of bringing it, basically needing the funding to do the mission, right? So thinking about that from a legal standpoint, for nonprofits, as Hazel was reflecting, a lot of times that comes through charitable donations. So there's a large, philanthropic community who makes donations. You apply for grants that align with whatever those donors, desires are, basically. What's interesting, and I just wanted to, this is why I wanted to interrupt, is with B Corps and with L3Cs, you're starting to see an increase in the number of investors who raise investment capital, so like funds, some of which are organizing, some of which are B Corps themselves, that their investment thesis is, if we invest in these entities that are doing good, it will ultimately generate better financial returns, because when, like Becky, you care about your employees and you've got a mission that your team can really get behind, some of the data is showing that these organizations actually perform better, not just in terms of in the community, but from an economic standpoint. And in that sense, there's kind of alignment between, you can be generating profit, and then that profit then enables people to go do other good things. So having the structure in place to kind of, again, align with the types of investors or the types of sources of funding that will ultimately help achieve your mission, you just kind of bear that in mind when you're kind of thinking through structure. And it can also help on the backside. Jennifer was mentioning, knowing that at some day they may want to exit, by having all of these things articulated. If you're a benefit corporation, if you're an L3C, articulated in your governance documents, it can protect the mission of that organization in the context of an exit. So I'll stop talking, but I just wanted to throw those couple of reflections out.
No, I appreciate it. That's helpful. Thanks, Helen. For sure. Okay, we have half an hour, so I'm gonna kind of compress two questions. So a two-parter. And the first part you've all, I think, actually touched on already, which is, if you market or have any outward facing collateral information, websites, whatever, how do you let people know about your business status? And I think you all do have it on the website, but I'll let you answer that part A, right? So how do you let people know? And then how has the legal entity you've chosen create a challenge or enhance it or impact the business in any way? So how do you let people know, if you let them know publicly? And does that legal structure challenge, impact, maybe enhance the business in some way? And then we'll save time to wrap up in terms of lessons learned, and then see what questions, if any, we have from the group. So Hazel, do you want to kick us off with that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So we definitely just wherever our name shows up, just about everywhere our name shows up, it follows with comma L3C. So that comes up with a lot of questions for folks. I think early on we were worried that not being a nonprofit and being an educational organization would make people a little like skeptical about it, because I think there is that paradigm that nonprofits are the ones that do good. And so are you really trying to profit off of doing educational things? And so I think being an L3C as opposed to an LLC was something that we could just have there, and it would fuel questions for people to say, oh, they have to have a mission, like they have to care about something as part of their legal designation. And so on our website, we even have a page dedicated to like why the sort of hybrid model of organization, so people can learn more about why we're organized that way, because I don't know of another similar organization like us that is incorporated the way that we are. So people are intrigued by that, and that just fuels a lot more conversation and interest, and ultimately results in really good positive feelings. So that's good in terms of how we get that out there. In terms of how it challenges our business, I think a big one is making sure that we're actually offering services of value that people are willing to pay for and also understand the cost of. I think a lot of nonprofits, and this is great, right? Like a lot of nonprofits are able to provide free opportunities to folks, but there's also really interesting research that shows like if everything is being offered free, the participants don't always value it. Like they don't see that it actually costs something. And so I think it's really interesting for us to function this way, to say like we are offering a great value, and school, even though it is free to you, whatever public school it is, we have this partner who's paying us this much money to provide this service for you. And it is both like figuratively and literally valued a little higher as a result of that. But that's a challenge because we need to make sure that we are always offering something that is worth that money. And I think that pushes us to be creative and innovative and adapt and do something a little bit different for everybody than what is ultimately out there. And I think that's a really good challenge to have. And I think that's really those are the couple of pieces besides what I've already mentioned around the collaboration piece that's important. I think just saying that we're an L3C shows that we're mission focused, and that's really important for an educational organization. And so it sort of snowballs in a good way in the different ways that we are publicly facing.
Great. That's very clear. That was good. Probably a few folks on the screen can relate to that. Yeah, Becky or Jennifer, do you want to jump in on that? So the question was about impact. Does your legal entity impact, challenge, enhance what you do?
You're muted, Jennifer.
Yeah, I can start. So it's a bit of both. I'd say, so now the B Corp certification is now every 3 years, and it's a very big hurdle. It's quite a lot of work. Luckily, there are also a bunch of consultant B Corps in the B Corp network that can help you. So we had somebody, Carolina Miranda, who just won a big Haltossic B Corp prize. We're very proud of her. She helped us through our certification, and they can help you, they can do the whole thing. They can advise you, they can look over what you've done so that it can be as accessible depending on, what you are. And then we have to, every year we've got to document all the donations we've done, and it's, we create the yearly impact report. So it feels like our first quarter is quite often really dedicated to going through all of those paces, which is really a lot of work. But by the same token, we're leading with our with this to partly work with other companies who care about your environmental, social, and governance, the ESG driven companies. So it's it works both ways. And also all of this work really helps us to continually improve, and it gives us a roadmap to follow. So, if we do this, this is going to be great for the company, and it's going to help with our recertification. So we've implemented new things, and we were really able to increase our score between the past two assessments that we did.
Great.
Yeah, that's really it.
Thanks, Jennifer. Jennifer, are you the one that spoke about like that rating system? I just wonder, whoever mentioned that, maybe put it in the chat if there's like an organization, or Becky, was that you? Now I don't remember.
The UNative, is that the one?
Maybe, yeah. So at some point before we wrap up today, if you have any information that you might want to put in the chat, that would be great. Becky, I don't want to cut you short with that question, but if you have like about a minute or two of airtime to share your thoughts.
Sure.
Impact, challenge, enhancement.
Yeah, I mean, being a certified B Corp has certainly helped with hiring. We include information about being a B Corp and what that means to our company and all of our job postings. And we certainly find people that want to work for a company that's more than just about making money, which we do want to make money, and we want to give back and be a force for good. One of the things that we're doing coming up in June, it's June 21st, is the Purpose-Driven Marketing Summit. So it's a half-day virtual event, and the purpose of this event is to get people together to talk about how they're marketing themselves as a purpose-driven company, and like that balance of sharing your mission, and at the same time you want to get people to buy or fill out a contact form or what that might be. So we'll be sharing some best practices of what leaders are doing around the country and around the world for that, and then having kind of like mastermind session with the people on attending the webinar. And yeah, I think as Hazel said, just having it in all of our marketing materials. I remember when we first became a certified B Corp, we had one client email us back saying like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that you're a corporation now. Like, we really like to do business with small businesses. And it was like, oh no, like there's so much education that still needs to happen around what it means to be a B corporation. Just because it has the word corporation doesn't mean that we're like a faceless organization. Like, we're the same. So yeah, still a lot of education, I think, that needs to happen with all these purpose-driven entities.
I hear you. I spent many conversations explaining to people that nonprofits actually can charge a fee for service. So that's a whole nother conversation, but yes, educating people, we're all in that business for sure. I think what I'll do is skip to sort of my final question for you all, and then we can still check in and see if there are questions. Lessons learned about having this business structure that you'd want the group to know, or things you wish you had known before. And last but not least, if you have any questions for each other, I just want to leave the mic open if you have anything you want to ask. But yeah, the big final wrap-up question in my mind is, at least one lesson learned, something you wish you'd known before.
I can share. So I feel like a big reason why I was able to complete the B Corp certification in a fairly timely manner was that I had been in business for 16 years when I started it. So I had like done a lot of work and had a lot of things documented. I also own another company called Wildwood Oyster Co., which is a handbag company, and that business is 5 years old. And when I think about putting Wildwood through the certification process of becoming a B Corp, it seems really, really daunting. So if you're thinking about going down the B Corp route, it's okay if it seems like really overwhelming. They do have a free assessment that you can take, so you can kind of grade yourself to see, where you are and where you're going. But just know that like this, it takes time, and just because you haven't met all of your points doesn't mean that you're not already doing so much great work above and beyond what other companies are doing. So just go at your own pace, and it will work out over time.
Great. It's a process. People are sometimes impatient or internalize. So I'm glad you said that, Becky, right? Like they may already be on the path. They're just not quite there yet. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good. Jennifer or Hazel, want to jump in? Lessons learned? Any advice?
I can piggyback off of that, because I think one of the things about the alternative of becoming a nonprofit that we were considering is like the labor to create a nonprofit and get the board together and really get cemented on your mission and vision, and then being really stuck to that mission and vision by your board later. I think everyone's heard those scary stories of the like founding director of a nonprofit being given the boot because they kind of wanted to shift how they were doing their stuff, and the board was like, that doesn't align with the mission. And so I think there was a lot of fear that comes up for people in terms of the complexity of organizing, whether becoming a benefit corporation or becoming a nonprofit. Like there's a lot of labor there. What I've really loved about being an L3C is it's been really simple. Really, really simple to incorporate as an L3C. We only have this annual report annually, obviously once a year, where we just have to be like, yep, that's still our mission. And like, that's it. Like there's not, I think on one hand, there probably should be more oversight of the L3C thing and like how well you're doing your mission. But on the other, it's very simple. So it was for us, we were able to hit the ground running really quickly and easily, with the idea that actually when we started as an L3C, we wanted to become a benefit corporation. So we were kind of treating it as a stepping stone. But so far, it served us really well to be an L3C with what we're doing and how we function and make connections. And so it has worked. And I think it's a good moment. And this panel is a good reminder to revisit, should we step into that B certification process? Again, should we look at that? Should we shift? But it's been working really well, and it's been really simple without the mounds of paperwork that so many of these options have. So maybe that's fine. So I think that's something to consider too for folks, is like, what are you trying to accomplish, and what will your model that you incorporate under, how will it serve those goals? And so kind of reverse engineer it. And I think another thing that came up was, and Helen mentioned it, we did want to be opened up to impact investment for folks who would be interested in a blended return of that social, environmental, and financial return. But that didn't come to fruition. So much like the idea of having it be a stepping stone to being a benefit corporation and having it serve us to receive impact investors, none of that has worked out, but that's been fine. We've been able to do business really well and sustainably using other models. So I think someone recently said, what you're planning is not how it's going to turn out. And I think that's good life advice, but also in a business, it's okay to reflect and shift and figure out what serves you best.
Good advice, as you said, for everyone. That's great.
So,
Jennifer, yeah.
I what's coming up for me, I've been a B Corp for a long time, and it's been evolving over the years, as my company has. And one of the things I've wasn't really expecting and have been really grateful for are these different networks that I spoke to the B1 network that I'm leading now, but for a few years I've been a member. I'm bringing this up partly because of this being a women's business thing. So within B Corp, there's a network called We the Change, which is for women B Corp, women-owned B Corps. And I've been very involved with them since it started. Eileen Fisher kind of really kindly gave us the space to launch that. And my sort of closest allies now are all part of that group. And I just got a grant, and in the end, almost all of the people that are going to help me implement that grant are companies that are part of the We the Change network. And I've gotten to know them over the years, and there's a lot of trust and a lot of goodwill that comes with it. And it's just been really invaluable to have these peers that I can talk to, A, about, well, can you build me a new website, or B, like, oh my God, what do I do now? Or who do you recommend, or whatever. And there's a high-low chat group and all sorts of things that come along with it. So, part of these processes also puts you within a network of people that are mission aligned and sort of minds and hearts are on the same page. And that takes a lot of the having to explain yourself to people that don't understand that off, that you don't even have to do that really. So yeah, I've just been really grateful for that, and loved watching that grow.
Great. Thank you, all of you. Any questions, you three ladies, or for our whole panel, any questions that you have for folks that might be still with us on screen? Anything you're curious about? The only, not question, but comment that I've seen in the chat, and Jordine, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to use it as an example. She's only been about a year into her business and establishing her business, but trying to use the B Corp concept as she evolves. And so I just wonder, can you give people, I don't know if this is a fair question, but can you give people a sense of the process or the timeline, or one or two things to keep in mind if people are interested, or they think they're interested in in B Corp, and I'm sorry, Hazel, it's kind of focused on B Corp for the moment, but or you can also, you know, share about L3C. So question being, do you want to speak or share anything about what does that process look like? Or if you were just starting, you might want to be thinking about like XYZ as you start so that it is an easier kind of progression or easier process. Is that a fair question? And thank you, Helen, for your comments on investment. Because I can't tell you how many clients come to the Women's Business Center and say, I'm a woman, I'm going to start a small business. Tell me what grants I can apply for. And inevitably, unfortunately, as a business owner, those grant opportunities are few and far between. Just straight up like grant, like here's some money as a business owner. Yeah.
I mean, I'll lead on this. Just, you know, we were founded in 2010 and very much bootstrapped, by the way. I mean, my one investment was to buy a refrigerated van for the vegetables we were delivering. But I found actually, you know, 2 years later when I started the certification process, and we're still quite small, I think it's actually not a bad idea to start early because you have sort of less moving pieces to manage within the framework. And then as you grow, you have that roadmap so that you can continually sort of make sure the decisions you're making align with, you know, the certification and the standards. Yeah.
Great. Can either the three of you or Helen, is there like a resource that you might recommend if people are interested? And we can include it if we send out the chat. I don't know, like, is there the association or the someone had mentioned the entity.
lab assessment?
Well, there's that, right? So there's the assessment, but then to get B certified. Like if I didn't know anything about it, where should I start looking? Where might I look? This would help me help clients, so I'm being selfish here.
I find the B Lab website itself to be pretty helpful. I don't know, I'm curious about the panelists' take on that, but they have a lot of good information there.
Yeah, agreed. And I think the assessment itself that you can just do for free to already get a sense of where you might land if you went through the assessment process, but that is changing completely. So we'll see what that looks like when they've published the whole thing.
Oh, was this the same thing I just found? Okay,
So the B Lab assessment,
it might be the same thing, yeah.
The assessment is basically what you have to go through to become certified. So in the past, you had to meet a minimum score, and
yeah.
And then you could become certified. But what's going to happen now is that there's going to be a baseline across all the different impact areas, a minimum baseline that you need to meet.
Great. What haven't I asked you that I should have asked you? Since I don't see a whole lot of other questions coming in. So before we wrap up, something you'd like to share, or I can give you, yeah.
I think one thing that has come up for us over and over again is how when we've tried to find an attorney or an accountant or any professionals, 99% of the time they've never heard of an L3C. And that has been really hard, actually. And so that's been a little tricky to like assess like whether they know enough to still like work with us or not. So that's something to also consider with L3Cs because they are kind of obscure. There's not a lot of them out there. I will often get emails from folks who are like, oh, I was looking up L3Cs and you're the first website that I came to. Can I just ask you questions about being an L3C because I cannot find a professional who will answer my questions? And they're like coming to me to ask. And so that is something that has definitely come up in the L3C world to consider. Yeah.
I assume at this point you have found folks who can help you with professional services, or are you still struggling with that?
I think an attorney is something we don't regularly need. We had one at the beginning and then he retired and we haven't needed him since. So I think that is still one that we would love when we need it later. An accountant, we did find an accountant finally, but yeah, but it was a lot to dig through, and it never feels good to go to a professional who doesn't know the basics of your legal designation. That doesn't feel great, but it's been really common. So I would love there to be like an L3C supporter website that exists. Like, I know what an L3C is and here are the services I could provide them. That would be a cool resource, but I haven't seen it.
Great.
Yeah, and I would say like even with my practice, I can think of two that one that we've done some work for, and one where I was representing an investor, and it was like an L3C where you're like, I'm not even sure if they're actually operating consistent with how they're supposed to be operating as an L3C. So I think that's absolutely true. I mean, they're still new; they're not in every single state, and so, yes, I think that's right. And I'd say the same thing for benefit corporations too. We're coming up on the fifth anniversary of the adoption of the Maine Benefit Corporation Act. So it was adopted right before, and it went into effect in September of 2019, and then COVID happened. And so I think there's a lot, even in the state of Maine, where people are just not fully up to speed on what it means to be a benefit corporation.
Well, we're all learning together, it sounds like. Great. Last chance for questions, comments. Otherwise, you're going to get 5 whole minutes back to your lives this morning. I think we covered a lot. Hope it wasn't too exhausting. Hope it was informative. Rachel, thank you to all of you, all 4 of you, for sharing your experience, wisdom, and thanks to those folks who showed up today. I know we had more sign up, and everyone will be getting the recording, and I will attempt to save the chat just because there were some helpful pieces in there as well. And see you for part 3. I'm not sure what that is, but reach out if you need any assistance, any help, and thank you all.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, lots of thank yous in the chat. So
inviting
thanks. All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye.